Welcome to the Inconceivably Connected podcast. I'm your host and fellow donor-conceived person, Nick Ludwig. For this week's episode, I am joined by a young woman named Hayley from Brooklyn, New York. Hayley works as a filmmaker and has known she's donor-conceived from a very early age, as she has two moms, a clear sign of a non-traditional family makeup. What she didn't know for much of her life, however, was that her half-sibling count was much, much higher than she ever expected. Upon receiving the full scope of information pertaining to her many biological connections, Hayley knew a creative project was starting to emerge. Fast forward to today, and she has now directed and produced the documentary titled Blood Friends, a film that explores the relationship dynamics between many of her newly discovered half-brothers and half-sisters who all share the same donor. Putting DCP stories out as pieces of art takes a tremendous amount of work, time, and patience, but Hayley was well equipped for the challenge. Let's hear from Hayley herself on all the ins and outs to her story and how Blood Friends truly came to be.
Hello, my name is Hayley Ulmer. I am based in Brooklyn, New York, and I am donor conceived. Um, it's something I've always known. I haven't known who my donor is, but I have always known I'm donor conceived, mostly as a side effect of having two moms instead of a mom and a dad. So it was kind of a cat's out of the bag situation from early on. There was I remember being told a very little bit about the donor by my mom. There was sort of like a list of traits that she had gotten from the sperm bank, and it was like his height, his general build. I guess it was like, oh, he's 5'11" and he's interested in acting and astronomy or whatever, and that was about it. And I kind of had to create a picture from there. Um, I remember asking my mom at one point if it was possible that I had siblings out there. And she said yes, but they do cap it at 10 births. That's what the sperm bank told her. We now know that was not the case with me or with many other donor conceived people. But that's sort of my background, I guess, growing up that way. And it was something that I was always curious about, and as I grew up, I think in different phases of my life, I would be more interested in it or less interested in it, maybe as a way of trying to find your identity, trying to figure out where I fit in. And sometimes I think when you are missing a big part of your makeup, that sometimes you can project things onto that. And then I definitely was curious about the sibling thing. That was always a big thing for me. Um, and then in 2018, it was about a week before I graduated college. I got a message on, I think it was ancestry.com. I had done both earlier that year. I think it had come out kind of recently, and our moms had gotten them for us to sort of see, maybe you got a sibling out there. And I didn't have anything at first, but I get this message basically cold asking me if I was donor conceived and was my donor this donor number.
Mm-hmm.
And it was. And I remember being like, oh my God, I found one. And so I'm freaking out, and I respond, I was like, yes, oh my gosh, this is me. I have a sibling. And then they're like, oh, cool. We have a group chat, actually. There's a bunch of us. And I was like, oh, okay, thinking 3 or 4 people found each other. And I get added to this group chat with 19 other people.
Wow.
And that's when I was kind of like, oh, this is a much different thing than I had anticipated. So that was sort of the beginning of it. And I remember that day was also a day we found out through like a complicated process, but one of our siblings had been able to track down who the donor was. And so it was basically from like nothing to everything in the span of like 2 hours, basically, that I found all this information out, which was very overwhelming. But it was cool. I mean, we all were around the same age. At that point, it was from around, I want to say 18 to 30. So everyone was pretty young and sort of in this like exploratory stage of life, and everybody was super eager to meet. So that year we did the first of many um, like donor sibling reunion, unions, whatever. And I think by the time we did that, we had about 20 to 25 siblings. So most of us kind of met up and for 3 days had this like insane like meeting. And I think a lot of people who've met siblings later in life can attest to this strange feeling you get when you meet them, that you like already know them and you can communicate with them in this way that feels a lot more intimate more quickly than you can with somebody else. So yeah, that's sort of our initial reaction. And I'm a filmmaker. It's something I've always done. I work in film production, so it's always been in the back of my head, like, how do I turn this into something, I guess. Um, and it ultimately turned out to be a documentary. So it took a while to kind of have the resources required and sort of figure out what we were going to do. But we started, filming here and there in about 2023. And then throughout that time, we were like working on the story. And then for this most recent reunion, I brought a full camera crew to our reunion. And by full camera crew, it wasn't like huge, but it was, a crew. Um, and we raised money on Kickstarter and we did that whole thing. And we shot the core of the documentary. Um, and we've been in post production for that ever since. So, yeah.
Very exciting. So you guys had met up at least once prior to the documentary being part of your world. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that would have been, I think that was our sixth reunion. So we did one every year. We do one every year.
Got it. And when you decided you wanted to film something, how did you break the ice to your half siblings that you wanted to make a documentary? Where was it mostly excitement from them or did you get any pushback? How did that play out?
I didn't get any pushback. I think it was mostly excitement and interest, maybe a little bit of like nerves of like, oh, we're gonna be on camera. Um, that said, I mean, one of the kind of traits that connects all of us that is really strong is this like very strong artistic streak. Um, a lot of us work in the arts, film, theater, music, kind of that area. So I think there's sort of like this interest there anyway. It wasn't coming out of left field. So I think in that sense, they were just like, we just want to support you. And if that means we have to be on camera, so be it. And that's kind of been the messaging throughout. And even the siblings that we couldn't feature on camera because it's still kind of like a secret in their family, which is the case for a lot of donor conceived people and the case for some of my siblings. They were like, "Oh, you can interview me off camera. Like, I'm still happy to help. I just can't have my face." So, still a lot of support, in that sense. Didn't have to like twist anybody's arm, which was nice.
Cool. And when you first started putting the idea together to film, what would you say was your intention behind it all? Was there a mission or a deeper purpose, something you were trying to show, or was it simply the weirdness and the uniqueness of it all that you wanted to capture?
I think it was a lot of things, right? I think And I've gone through different phases of what I wanted to show and how I've felt about it in different, over the years that I've been thinking about it and working on it. But definitely showing this weirdness, trying to like highlight what this connection is or what it could be, and really sort of like live in the ambiguity of it. It's something that I feel a lot. And I'm trying to like, have been trying to tease out like, what is this relationship? What are we? Is it family? It's not quite friends. It's like kind of this in between that's hard to kind of explain. And so I think in a lot of ways, the film was trying to tease that out. Um, at the same time, we started seeing a lot more films about donor conception, specifically the really bad stories, right? Like these like crimes. And it does happen, right? It's a very unregulated industry and people have been like massively injured by it. However, like as somebody watching it, I was like, this wasn't my experience either.
Hmm.
And I think what's so great about like you doing a podcast and like and donor conceived people like telling their own stories is the fact that there are so many different ways to be donor conceived and there's so many different like shades of how we experience it. And mine has been generally positive, I mean, it does not change like how I feel about how the industry should be managed or anything like that.
Right.
But I think there's still value in exploring those connections and what those things mean to us.
Got it. When you began filming, had every one of the half siblings, or even I think there's like parents of the half siblings that appear as well, right? Okay.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. So had everybody met before, or were some of them being introduced to each other for the first time when the documentary crew was there?
I don't think we had any, no. Yeah, we didn't have any new siblings at that reunion. Um, I did think about, like, very briefly, like, should I try to film the first reunion? But I really don't think people would have gone for that. It's really disruptive to have a crew in there, no matter how good they are. And also part of the reason I was able to film was because of the trust that was already there with my siblings and the families, which wouldn't have existed in that first meeting, which happened in 2018.
Right.
Um, but yeah, so it was like the film kind of puts us in the middle of this relationship that has been ongoing, but is still growing and changing.
Got it. Okay. And I think it's such an interesting dynamic and an interesting setup that you guys have, because I think a lot of donor conceived people, at least the ones who don't really struggle too much with it, may sometimes have this feeling of like longing for a way to connect more deeply, and you and your group are choosing to all meet up and have almost like a sibling summit where you come
Close.
together. And it, it, that to me seems pretty exciting, and I guess I'm curious, like, how do you decide where you're going to go? Do you have like an agenda of what you're going to do when you're all together? Who's doing the planning? Is there planning? Like, what kind of activities are there? Like, what does that all look like? Because it sounds like it's kind of a vacation almost.
It's like summer camp.
Yeah.
It has like summer camp vibes. Yeah, I mean, actually do get a really good sense of that from the doc, but of like each day. Um, it tends to be unstructured, mostly because there is a lot of us, and most of the time we just kind of want to hang out and connect. Um, we're not great at like organized group activities. It's a lot of like type B, like people who are just like the amount of time it takes us to take like a group picture is ridiculous. It's like someone's always like wandered off halfway through. So so like doing too many structured activities doesn't usually work. Um, early on, the moms helped with some of the planning. Um, as far as like help booking the Airbnb, I mean, a lot of them are like very passionate about this sibling connection and we have relationships with them as much as we have with each other. Um, and also, especially because some of our siblings were younger. I mean, I think I said 18, but it was actually, now I'm remembering, some of them were like 16, 17. So, especially at that first reunion, like they were coming with just because their kids were minors, you know?
Mhm.
Um, but they have kind of become part of this sibling story as well. However, as we've gotten older, we've started to kind of take over the reins. Um, it's kind of like fall into whoever's like the most responsible at the time, I think, to do it. I mean, different people can do different things. We usually vote on a location, like do like a poll, and it's the same thing with the dates, and you kind of just have to like pick one that works. Um, I definitely took on most of the planning for this past reunion because we were filming it, so it was kind of like the one I was in charge of, which kind of worked out because I was like, well, I have to pick the house because the house also has to like work for filming too, and like those kinds of things. Um, but yeah, I mean they get planned by people and we kind of all pitch in, but usually it's like one or two people that sort of take the lead and we do the best we can. But we're not strong planners either, to be honest. Like that's another thing that like the genes are strong, like the connection genes are very strong. And unfortunately, we're all pretty weak in the same areas. So sometimes certain things can be challenging, but yeah.
Got it. And what kind of scene are we talking here? Do you guys lean towards being out in the mountains, in the woods, at the beach? Like, what's the setting typically when you all come together?
I mean, it changes. We've been in both the beach and the mountains. We've been down in Florida. We've been in West Virginia. Our most recent one was the Philly suburbs. We've been in Washington, D.C. It tends to be mostly East Coast because most of us are based on the East Coast.
Okay.
But there has been talks of like, we got to do a California reunions for some of the more West Coast people. It's easier to get there.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's kind of based on like where people want to visit or like sometimes too. I know we moved one of the reunions down to Asheville specifically because one of our siblings has two young kids and had a baby kind of recently, and we wanted her to be able to come. And it was easier for her to do it when it was only a 2 hour drive versus like having to do a whole plane trip.
Hmm.
So sometimes we plan it around that as well.
Got it. And I imagine with a group as large as yours, most of you are scattered across the country for the
Yeah,
most part.
yeah, for the most part. It's still pretty concentrated in the Northeast. One thing that's nice actually is there's about seven of us in New York City right now. So we do get to see each other a little more. And there's a few in DC. So it is spread out, but also like, there's like pockets in different places, it seems.
Right. Okay. And let's talk about the donor for a second. Now, is he is he alive still? I guess
He,
that's where we start. Okay.
yeah.
Is he aware of all of you coming together and, kind of putting a project around the situation or building a project?
Um, he is not aware of the documentary. Um, he is aware of all of us meeting. Um, he knows that we found each other and he knows who we are. Um, that happened very early on, and he was like, "That's great. I'm gonna take a step back." Um, it's possible it's gotten through to him. We've had some light conversation with some of the people kind of around him, like his second or it's like one of our cousins on his side
Uh-huh.
has like a radio show, and we've talked to him about it and that kind of thing. So there has been some connection there, but he mostly has like kind of wanted to keep his distance from the whole sibling thing, which is okay because to be honest, like like I think meeting the donor was important to a lot of us for a long time, but once the sibling thing kind of happened, we sort of realized like, oh no, this is way more important to us, and this is something that's much more significant than meeting this donor or having this like maybe relationship with him.
Got it. So he's on the outside of it all for now. Um, are there things that you can draw from the donor, whether it's personality, traits or physical characteristics or, whatever it might be that, comes from the biological side that you look at him and you say, oh, that's where we get that from?
Yeah, the genes are strong. I'll tell you that. Like it's kind of crazy how similar a lot of us are and similar to him. Physically, there's like certain traits that a lot of us share. I personally look more like my mom, but there's like definitely traits that people have. Actually, one of my siblings looks exactly like him. Like we've seen
Hmm.
photos of him and like Nick looks exact, not you, but like his name's
Yeah.
also Nick, but
Uh-huh.
looks exactly like him. And then from there we sort of have different variations. There's like these like it's like kind of like a pointed chin, this like dark curly hair, um kind of pale skin. It's sort of a look. That's sort of like the physical attribute. Heavy eyebrows, that's a big thing. And then I would say otherwise, a big thing has been like arts and musicality. He himself was a musician and a composer and a piano player. Um, we've got like a lot of very, very talented musicians. And you mentioned before, how do we sort of connect during these reunions? And music is actually a huge way that a lot of the siblings connect. So we have people bringing guitars, we have people, playing. We try to book houses that maybe have a piano in them. Like we have a couple drummers, so like just musician like them playing together, people playing together is kind of a big part of that as well. And that's a big uniting thing.
I was going to say that's a family band that it takes on a different shape than most that we're used to
That's
seeing.
very true. Yes. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. And then as far as the half siblings meeting each other, I guess I'll start with you. Were you introduced to the group at large at first, or was it more like individual by individual? Like, how did that play out? Because when you have as many half siblings as you do, I imagine it's hard to, get like one-on-one time with each person before diving into the group altogether.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was dropped right in. It was the first meeting, so we were most of us had were meeting each other for the very first time. There was a few people who had met before. um Either they had met through like the donor sibling registry that like their moms had been a part of, or they had met just because they happened to live in the same city. um after the After like the 23andMe stuff, they found each other that way. But by and large, that first reunion was the first time people met, and that was my first time as well, and it was very overwhelming. But eventually, like, it sort of like settled down and we all kind of were in a house together, and that's when like everyone really started to connect. And big groups are always challenging. For me, I definitely prefer one-on-one and smaller groups, but I think you can kind of, it can be a long weekend. It's usually like 2 to 3 days, and you can really, I think, at least I try to find time, to sort of speak one-on-one with everybody and kind of reconnect with everybody. I mean, different people have people they're closer to than others, but like, certain years too, it's different. I know I had one sibling that I hadn't really talked to much one year, but then we hung out the whole time the next year. It just sort of, and we connected on a different way that year. And now we're like a lot closer. So I think it really just depends. Uh, but that is always a challenge, is navigating like larger groups.
Right, because you wanna give everybody an equal opportunity to make those connections, but after when you get to a certain point, it's size-wise, you're kinda forced into, deciding, "Alright, this person will get my attention this time, this person will get my attention next time." Um, when you are in the filming process, is it, um is it such that you're just filming the organic conversations that are occurring, or do you kind of have a story in mind that you're trying to build towards?
Yeah, so that's always the question, and that's what can be tricky too about documentary filmmaking, is like we don't necessarily have a script. I would say we sort of have bullet points, right? And this project is sort of like a co-project with me and sort of my filmmaking partner, whose name's Sam McCoy. They're a much more experienced film director. I usually do the producing and they usually direct. And this one, we were kind of switching roles and kind of doing both. So it was really helpful. Like we had these conversations about like, what are these sort of ideas we want to hit and themes we want to kind of tease out. Um, and we kind of pulled that for like interview parts. So we did do like some talking head interviews with different siblings. Um, and we had those lists. And then the idea for the weekend though was to just sort of like cover things, you know. There were like a few activities that we like to do, and there were a few things of like, okay, you know, we have to get like a scene like playing music, and we have to get like people doing this thing and these kinds of shots. And there's like this one game that people play that's always fun, and we're like, you know, let's try to instigate this game or whatever it may be. But for the most part, we were just sort of like following people around and filming them organically, which always makes it like a big lift in the edit, trying to kind of pull and tease the story out from there.
Got it. And then I guess the way that this was produced, you ran a Kickstarter campaign, a successful one, and I'm curious, when you first launched that, what kind of response did you see, and were there any surprises along the way?
It's a good question. I mean, I find so this is not the first Kickstarter I've done. Um, and the one thing I always find with Kickstarter is like, oh, you have more people supporting you than you think, which is always interesting. Like, you know, you'll get donations, especially because you have to kind of share aggressively. Um, but you get donations from people I knew in high school but haven't talked to in, you know, 12 years, but they'll throw $20 in, you know, um, which is kind of like affirming in a lot of ways. Like there are people kind of cheering for you. And that's sort of my general like takeaway with Kickstarters, especially successful ones. Um, the other thing that was helpful with it was like we had to put together like a trailer and I had to write stuff out and do all this stuff and kind of figure out how to best tell this story. So just creating the Kickstarter and the page from that, even though we had like none of it edited at all at that point. Um, and I think the trailer was edited before we even shot the documentary. Um, we had to kind of like create some sort of thesis and some sort of like thing to tie it together, which is sort of just better to kind of help you along in the preparation process and storytelling process.
Mhm. And as you're figuring out the direction and, where you want the story to go, is that something that is limited to you and maybe just a couple other individuals, or is it truly like a family group project? Like all the siblings are involved in it?
No, it's primarily like a filmmaking project. So it's me and my co-director, and then I'd say the editor as well are kind of the core storytellers here. I have shown the film to a few siblings and gotten some notes. Like I did send it to one, like an early cut of it, a very early cut of it, and saying like, I want your sib notes. You know, like we're getting a lot of like edit notes, artistic notes, but like specifically I'm looking for like, are we capturing what we need to capture? Are we capturing the story? What am I missing?
Mhm.
Um, but in general, like you can't have 30 voices in a
Yeah.
in a creative room. It's just kind of a nightmare. Um, I will say for me as a I guess creator, as a director, it feels like I have more voices in my head, maybe.
Mhm.
Um, there's always this kind of thing of like, oh, I don't want somebody to feel bad about not being featured as much. And it has nothing to do with them. It's just that this is where we went and we are making it a short film. So we only have so much time. And I think that's sort of like a byproduct of making a film about your family or making anything about people you care about is like there's always a little bit of anxiety just about how they're included.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I kind of knew everybody's limits. I kind of knew what people were comfortable with sharing and what not. So we were able to steer clear of those kinds of things in the edit.
Got it. And you mentioned the filming is done. So what's the plan going forward? Do you have a release date?
Yeah, so we are in sort of towards the end of our post-production process, which is like a very kind of long multi-step process. And we will be submitting to film festivals. So the premiere date will be based on the official premiere date will be based on that. Um, but the actual like we are going to be doing different screenings. We're looking to do different screenings in different locations. Um, there is going to be like a private New York screening for um, certain Kickstarter donors and like siblings, that kind of thing. Um, but in general, like the official premiere, it will be like most likely like a festival premiere. And that'll be based on whatever festivals we get into.
Cool. And then I guess on an individual level, when did or has it always been something that the people in your life have been aware of that you're donor conceived? Or did this become news to people as you were filming, creating the Kickstarter, being open about putting a documentary out? When did when did your circle of people start to become fully aware that this was a big aspect of your life?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was never something I really thought about or explained much prior to finding the siblings, right? Like, I remember being a kid and people being like, how do you have two moms? Like, you need a mom and a dad, and being like, I don't know, like science, I guess, and like kind of understanding a little bit about it. But it was like a very mechanical process. And then if somebody asked, it'd be like, oh, we used an anonymous donor. I don't, and that's kind of it, right? That was the story. And that was the story at that point.
Mm,
Um, but now it's like a lot more in depth. So yeah, I mean, I'm very obviously very free about it. I shared it with the world, I'm making a
yeah.
movie. There's an Instagram page. Like, um, it is always like an awkward question though, if someone asks you like on a date or something, like, how many siblings do you have? Because
Mhm.
it's like, well, how long do you have? Like how much information is too much information right now? Because like I have this is like a whole thing.
Yeah.
And maybe we just like want to get on to the next question. So that's usually, but yeah, if there's time for it, I'll drop it in. It's like a good fun fact, that kind of thing.
And now I guess in your case, since this was, something you've known for most of your life, did you ever deal with, hurdles that you had to clear in order to fully be the most open version of yourself?
It's an interesting question. I mean, obviously, like prior to finding out information, right? I think, have identity struggles that are kind of similar more towards people who don't know who a parent is, whether it's through like adoption or just like, a parent who kind of ran off, whatever it may be. Like, there is like an impact of like not knowing, and you're kind of like categorizing things about you that are like the people in your life and the things that aren't. Um, Especially me, who's like somewhat different from my mom, and then my brother and my mom's partner, who my brother I'm not related to at all. And we are very different people because it was a different mom and a different donor for him. So we were brought up together, room across the hall, and we would fight over the remote, but like biologically, he's not related to me at all.
Mhm.
Um, and I would say like that has kind of been interesting for me. And I would say that's kind of the thing that I've sometimes, I guess, struggled with a little is, um, I guess like there's this understanding of family and how important genetics and blood is to that. I've always been much more of a nurture person. It's very much like, especially when you are raised right in a non-traditional family. There's a lot kind of put into being like, it's about love, it's about connection. This is what builds families, not blood. And I still believe that's mostly true.
Mhm.
But, you really can't deny this like connection that you have and this like value of like speaking with people who see the world very similarly to me. And I think I bring up my brother because like I love him, but we are not alike. We have almost nothing in common. We sometimes like miss each other when it comes to like humor and different things. And then I met some of my, I guess, brothers through my biological brothers through like donation, my half siblings. And I was able to connect with them immediately on like this like, just like this, yeah, you just connect with them. And I was kind of like, oh, so sort of like balancing those two things and like being able to have like a direct comparison to that kind of experience has been kind of interesting.
Mhm. And now with your brother, not that I'm asking to get into his side of the story, but,
Mhm.
with your differences in mind, how do you how do you think he sees your decisions and your choices to go down the path of, "Hey, I'm gonna make a movie about this," like, and weigh that against the way he deals with being donor conceived himself? Is there a lot of contrast there, or is there enough understanding where he can see, "Okay, this is why Haley has to do it this way."
Yeah, I mean, I think I make a lot of choices that he thinks are dumb, but in general, um, I would say that like I mean he's got a different experience. He was always, I think, a little less interested than I was about it, but he also just like I think was more into it after I found my siblings, and he was like, "Well, Haley's got these. Like, let me try to be more active in it." And um, for the most part, he really hasn't. Like, there haven't been as many siblings, and they're just like not that interested, to be honest. So he has like a very different experience with that.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, he was interested in meeting them. He's in the movie. I kind of twist. He's the only one I really had to twist their arm to be in the movie. Actually, is him.
Well, that
Um,
was my next question is he or your parents have they met the whole crew? Are they ingrained in all of that?
yeah, my mom and my brother came to the most recent reunion. My mom went to one of the ones a couple years ago as well. Um, but yeah, like I kind of twisted everyone. I was like, all right, everyone's got to help. Everyone's got to do this. Um, so yeah, and they said, they see this connection and they see a lot of the similarities between us and yeah, and that kind of thing. But I don't know if it's like changed how he feels as a donor conceived person. It's weird. I haven't really talked about that too much. He and I haven't talked about it that much.
Mhm.
Whereas I talk about it with my donor siblings a lot. So I don't know, which is weird because he's just as donor conceived as we are. But
Right. Right. But totally different genetic makeup, so,
yeah,
yeah.
that's true.
So, what does your mother make of all of it when she's around the half siblings? What is her perspective of it all? And how does she involve herself in all of that?
Yeah, I mean, my mom's a little more hands off. I will definitely say like some of the other moms are like, oh, like look at the ears and look at this and like, there's a lot of, especially early on, there was a lot of like comparing pictures or like, oh, or if a new sibling comes in, it's like, oh, he looks like Paul or whatever, that kind of thing. But um, my mom's been like, just as a person, is a little bit more reserved and kind of like takes a step back. But yeah, I mean, I would say she's mostly interested in it because I'm interested in it. Um, I think for her, and honestly, quite a lot of moms, like they don't really care about the donor. It's in a lot of ways he was sort of just like a means to an end.
Mhm.
Um, but they do care about us, and they're happy for the most part, and my mom in particular is happy that it's something that we've found and it's a way that we can connect with each other. But yeah, there are certain, actually, at the most recent reunion that my mom was at, I don't know, one of the other moms, I guess, had a picture of one of my siblings up. And my mom's like, like as a child, like as a 4 or 5 year old. And my mom's like, "Where did you get that baby picture of Haley from?" Like, because we looked so similar, when we were kids. So she definitely acknowledges the similarities.
Hmm.
But yeah.
Got it. When you have these big meetups, I mean, now your group is quite large. Um, what is it like? And I'm not sure if this has happened anytime recently, but I'm sure you get or have gotten new additions to the group over the last couple years. And you said that these meetups have been going on since 2018. Is that correct?
Hmm. Yeah, with the
So when
COVID break.
right, so when you get these new additions to the group and everybody else has already met before, what's it like welcoming those new people into, your already established clan of siblings?
Yeah, I mean, I will say like even though there's like 32 of us now, the reunions aren't usually like 32 strong, It's like because, people, especially now that we're older, sort of have lives and sometimes scheduling is an issue. Um, but that said, we do our best to not make it super overwhelming for people and not to like bombard them with questions or information. And I think there's sort of this sense of like we're going to be friendly and include them, but also like understand that it's a lot and we're a lot. And it's like this kind of new environment. So, but yeah, I mean, I think we all just really go out of our way to make somebody new feel welcome, and we kind of try to bring them up to speed ahead of the time and be like, this is all the information we have and this is sort of who we are. And I think what happens too is like, or what has happened, especially with people who have decided to come and kind of join the sibling group, is, they see a lot of themselves in us. And I think it's not just curiosity, but like we try to lead with these things that we already know a lot of us kind of have in common. And usually common ground springs from there.
Got it. So we don't have an official release date for the documentary yet. Um, Blood Friends, that's the name of it?
Yes, but we have an Instagram, so we'll be posting on that more as the kind of the rest of the year goes on, um, especially now that like the film is mostly done. So as we do different things, that's called it's at Another Donor Story on Instagram, and that's sort of like the best place you can follow us and like see the siblings and kind of stay up to date. Once we have a screening and that kind of thing, all of that information will be there,
Sure.
that kind of thing.
Got it. Any other additional thoughts that maybe we haven't covered, whether it pertains to your filmmaking process or your own individual story that you think is worth mentioning?
I mean, I guess like I would say one of the bigger struggles for me making this film was, and then maybe you were able to avoid it by writing a book. Maybe that's what I should have tried to do too. But was feeling like I couldn't tell the whole story.
Mhm.
And there's so many different facets of donor conception, and there's so many like pros and cons and complexities, and basically like anything you explore, I feel like has to be teased apart a little bit. It's really hard to kind of make any real statements one way or the other. Um, and I think like I struggled with that, being like, do I want to talk about the industry, like what feels responsible, by, I wouldn't say this is like a pro sperm bank story, it's definitely just trying to give a realistic kind of perspective on our situation.
Yep.
But I think there's always this question, especially when dealing with something, an industry that has hurt a lot of people. What is responsible, what is accurate, and knowing that I have so much to say and so many people have so much to say on this, and being very limited to this like amount, you know? I think in some ways we were like, "All right, we need to, like, cast aside everything else and just focus on, like, these 2 things or these 3 things because we really can't touch anything else because we just don't have the time." So I think just, like, picking a lane was, like, the hardest part too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think there's no clear answer in terms of, like, putting your experience out to the public other than being authentic, right? Like,
Yeah.
people are gonna have good experiences with this, and other people are gonna have really difficult ones. There's no right or wrong in how you're supposed to experience it. It's only the truth of how you experience it, and I think that's what anyone who wants to put a piece of art out related to the subject matter should be leaning into, is that genuine authenticity, right? Like, this is what I experienced, this is what I felt, and it's real. I'm not making any of it up.
Right.
Yeah, so that's interesting because in filmmaking, you are kind of confined to, a certain amount of time, and especially when you have a lot of people involved in the film, you have to make certain cuts. You can't write 500 pages and put it out there and,
Right.
go
Right.
on and
Yeah.
on about it. It's gotta be a lot more concise than a book would have to be.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what comes of all of this. I've seen the clips and it looks really intriguing to me. Obviously, I might be a little biased since I'm donor conceived myself, but I'm super pumped for it to come out. I think it's awesome that you've, put a project like this together. I think the more eyes on the lives of donor conceived people, the better. Because in the end, we're all advocating for, a more just and fair path towards dealing with this. And I think that's all we're really asking for is fairness. So,
Right. Yeah. And to be seen, I guess that's the other thing too is like as and people, right? Like I think a lot of times, especially in that space, it's like the baby is the product, but a baby is a person too. So like, having that perspective and they grow up and have to, deal with these things. Um, but yeah, no, I think it can be a beautiful process and a painful process, and it's both most of the time. Um, so I think you have to be able to like try to be able to wrap your head around a lot of things, and being donor conceived is definitely like living in between a lot of spaces. I think you have to get used to that.
yeah. I guess the last question, this is just one totally off the top of my head.
Mhm.
With a group of your size, I'm sure you see a wide range of, positive versus negative emotions around it all. And I'm curious if there's anything that you can see within, you know, the part of your group that handles this in an open and embracing way. Are there ways that they go about living their lives that make it such that it's a positive?
I mean, I would say like overwhelmingly, at least the sibling thing is the positive, right? I mean, having these connections, having these reunions is sort of like the thing that a lot of those siblings like focus on. Some of them, I think there's a challenge and it's hard because they're sort of hiding it from parts of their family. Some of them were told in secret by their mothers and are like, don't tell your father that you know. So they're like, they can't be tagged in anything. You can't have anything on social media. And I think like for them, like, it can be challenging because you are kind of living this like split life. And overwhelmingly though, there's just this sense from them of like, no, I want to be able to pull more people into this and like have them know me more. Um, I think people did have, some people did have a bit of like maybe an identity crisis with it, but I think at least from what we've talked about, like I think just being able to like communicate with each other, and I think a lot of us have been able to like open up to each other in a very specific, unique way about like certain anxieties, whether it is about donor conception or the donor himself. Um, so we kind of created a support system amongst ourselves. And I know that there are like donor conceived spaces online and like different places where they're trying to create these like donor conceived spaces and like places where people can get support from each other, which I think is great. Um, Ours is just like because of, I guess, our personalities and the fact that there's a bunch of us, it's kind of built in a little bit,
Right.
which we're lucky, that's something that's very unique and fortunate for us.
Hmm. Cool. Any last thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think like for us, like the biggest like frustration with it has been like, we don't have great access to the health information, right? Like that's been a huge thing for us now. And I think we all like kind of deal with things differently as we're getting older. Um, and I think, one thing for us too that changes is like as we get older, right? Like how will these connections stay with us, through the rest of our lives? Like, how do we integrate these connections fully into our lives? We can go to parties, we can go to, people, I have friends that know my siblings, like, especially the ones in New York, like, we invite each other to events and different things like that. But I think there is still the sense of like, we're a separate entity. And I think that can be a challenging space to be in because it's sometimes a little more difficult to just like pull that into your everyday life.
Right.
Um, so like even though we do have this like amazing connection, it is sometimes difficult to integrate it.
I can relate to that too, where it's like, okay, this person is technically a brother or a sister, and in a lot of key ways they may feel like one, but
Mm.
on the other side of it, like, I've met them only an I can count on one hand how many times I've met them.
Right.
So
Right.
it's like the two ends, like strongest bond there could be versus kind of a stranger, you know?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
at
Yeah.
what point does the scale tip towards, the brother or sister side? Or does it tip towards that side? Because it may not.
Well,
Um, I guess time will tell.
yeah. And it takes like, I think a lot of like meaningful connection for it and like work. I think that's kind of the issue is like, how do we make this kind of space in our lives for each other?
Right.
I feel like that's maybe the only way. I don't know. I don't have the answer either. But you're right, it is. I mean, have you ever run into like somebody in public um that you know while you were with like a half sibling? Has that ever happened to you?
No. We've only met up, I wanna say 4 times or so. My wife recently came to the last meetup that we had, so that was the
Oh,
first time she
cool.
was introduced to a few of them. There are, I guess, 14 in total if you include the donor's 2 sons.
Hmm.
But of the dozen that, were not raised by the donor, I think only 6 of us have actually met up in person. Um
Yeah.
so yeah, it's yet to happen where, we're walking down the street maybe and a friend of mine will be like, "Who are these people? Oh, wait, you kind of look like each other. Like, what what is this?" Um,
Yeah. It happened to me.
it
Yeah.
did.
It's happened to me multiple times actually.
Really? How did that
Yeah.
go?
So the first time it happened to me was actually like not long after the first reunion, I think. And one of my half like brothers was driving through. I was living in Pittsburgh at the time and was driving through and we stopped and he grabbed dinner and we were like walking around and I ran into somebody who's like not a it wasn't like a friend, he was more like a coworker slash acquaintance. And I was just like and I like kind of introduced them. I was like, "Oh, hey Kevin, this is my I don't
Friend with
know."
the same face.
Yeah, friend. Like it was just like this very awkward. I like panicked, It was almost like a like we didn't define the relationship kind of thing because it's like I don't want to say brother because that seems like it's too intense, but then I don't want to say like friend because that doesn't seem accurate either. So I think just like even finding the language is an issue. But then, recently it actually happened. I was not the one that knew the other person. I was like the sibling tag along. And yeah, it was just kind of a quick, like, this is my sister. Now, I don't know how much background that other person knows, so that's always a thing. But it's just interesting too how those things have changed like over the years. And I think like even now I feel more comfortable using more familial terms than I did a few years ago. And I think that just comes with time or maybe just getting used to it. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think they're terms that need to be earned in a sense,
Mhm.
like even if it's just through time and spending, different reunions together, like it's at a certain point, it may just feel right to say brother or sister. Um but no, that hasn't happened to me, not yet. The one thing that I do have in the back of my mind sometimes is there is actually a half sister of mine who I have not met yet, but I know she lives only one town over from me. So anytime
Ooh.
I go to work in the coffee shop in the morning, part of me is always like, "Oh, there's a chance she could come in here today," and I don't really know how to handle that. Because
Yeah.
she's not opposed to our situation. Like, she doesn't totally shy away from it. Like, we've messaged each other before, but she's also not at a point where she's been ready to meet in person. So what happens if we see each other in person? Do I break the ice or do I just pretend like I don't see her? I don't really know.
Uh, yeah. I mean, I totally I totally get that. Like that would be totally stressful for me. I actually one of my siblings lived in the same town, same city, or was going to college in the same area that our donor was in. And I know that she was always like, "What if he walks in?"
Yeah.
You know?
And it could happen. It could
And it
happen.
could happen. It could happen at any time. Yeah, I'm always like very suspicious on like dating apps too, of
Mhm.
like people who look too I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. Like certain characteristics. I'm like,
Yeah. You match with
I don't think
somebody and one of the prerequisites is, "Would you take a DNA test before we meet up?" Like,
yeah, I know because people don't like they don't know. Like people's parents lie to them. So I'm kind of like, I don't know, like how I need to like see a picture of your father and and then we can go from there.
I know we've never met before, but, like, yeah, I need the family tree sent over my way.
Yes, exactly.
I wanna give a huge thank you to Haley for sharing her story with us and providing a glimpse into what her creative process looks like. If you'd like to keep up to date on Blood Friends as Haley prepares to put her finished product out into the world, you can follow at Another Donor Story on Instagram for any and all news on the film. On the note of Instagram, if you'd like to follow the podcast on social media, just give a search for at Inconceivably Connected to keep closer tabs on what's to come in the future. If you're enjoying these episodes, please consider sharing with others and leaving a 5-star rating or review. And if you'd like to know more about my own story, give a search for Inconceivably Connected, a true story of shocking DNA results and chasing the unknown. The music, editing, and production of the Inconceivably Connected podcast were done by myself, Nick Ludwig. And if you're donor conceived and would like to share your own story on the podcast, please fill out the quick form linked in the episode description of any episodes released so far. That's a wrap for now. See you again next Monday.